Today I'm presenting a Shigeru Kawai model SK-2. Although it looks new and it plays new, this one's 24 years old. Stick around. Hi, this is Ted Barsley with Alamo Piano Galleries. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. And if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them. We like to interact and see if we can get some kind of correspondence going with you. And we do thank you for all of your viewership and comments on the content. That's really important. It's allowed me to improve. It's allowed the video channel to come along. We're starting to approach 20,000 viewers now, so tell all your good friends and encourage them to join up. Here's the other thing I wanted to mention. This is an SK-2 piano. It's 24 years old, and I found out in the process, I think it's been about 7 or 8 years since we have been a Kawai and an SK Kawai dealer. And what I'm not familiar with is the very early entrance line of the SK models, because they were at the best top of the line manufacturing production they could at the time they made them. However, since the piano is based on the SK-EX and the EX stands for experimental, there's been a lot of major improvements and upgrades along the way in the last 24 years old. Now this piano has mostly everything exactly like the SK does, but there are some better improvements that have happened along the line. The first thing I noticed right up front is that the solid brass casters are now actually about twice the size what they are on the older ones. The newer ones have a good sized caster and they're a little bit thinner on the old pianos. And there are some things that are obviously not on this piano, but the other thing I noticed right up front is that the key tops have changed for both the black keys and the white keys, because the black and white keys on the new SKs are not this shiny, glossy, bright. So there's been a change in the textures of both the ebonies and the ivories on the keys. It still has the writing desk. The writing desk still lays down so you can do your composition work and make your notes onto your scores. That is still the same. The solid, what they call the stretcher overlap integrated design, does not exist on this SK. It's a lot smaller. It doesn't wrap around. The pin block doesn't come around to the front side, embracing the entire frame. That's another improvement which adds to more stability. And I've noticed that I'm not 100% sure about the rim, if the rim has been made wider. At somewhere along the line, the history of almost any piano's development, unless you are really with that model from the very inception until where it is today, it's really hard to describe the step-by-step upgrades of pianos as the model moves along. And that is very much true for almost every single manufacturer. It's hard to tell the history of how Yamaha made pianos on this certain line, how Kawai made pianos on a certain line, and the same thing is true for most other manufacturers going back 100 to even 150 years back. The development of some of the key Steinway pianos has a history that it seems like, unless the people are really, really involved in maintaining and working on Steinway pianos, it's only as you're doing a lot of detail for different models for every year that you start noticing the subtleties and the difference of manufacturing and how that really improved or maybe just did absolutely hardly any improvement to the model. However, on the SKs, and I can tell you also on the Steinways and the Yamahas, all the improvements that have been added in the last 20 years have been major upgrades, and they're worth their while. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that the stretcher overlap is not here. And also the other thing that is not here is it does have the ABS composite action in it. It is not the Millennium 3 action, the dark black carbon fiber action that we've come to know on the SK pianos. This SK-2 does not have that type of action. It has the exact same action, but it's built out of a different material, the ABS Strion. And so with those two things, the difference in the action, the soundboards have always been the same. They've got them more detailed now. The one thing I wanted to mention is that as you listen to this piano and you play it, I do feel like the action is just a tad bit, I mean a micrometer heavier. A micrometer is not a measure in weight, but anyway, it's just a micrometer a bit heavier than the existing SK pianos that are coming out with the carbon fiber action. Let's have a listen to this one and we'll come back for the wrap up. Now, I love the way this thing played. I can say it came in tuned like that. It is just, we unboxed it and this is how it came out. The other thing I wanted to mention that this is important to me is we're going to go along step by step with the next video we shoot is going to be a brand new SK-2. So I'm going to get some comparison. There's some things I'm not well aware of, like I do know that the dual pivot hammers are not going to, dampers is not going to be on this piano. That's a relatively new development in the last number of years. I'm not sure about the boxwood bridge caps. So these are things that one by one, based on the new brochure for the Shigeru Kawai pianos, I'm going to compare it to, and here, and when we get to the new one, I'll be able to see and do a side-by-side, compare the action, compare the frame, and do all of that, because there have been only improvements on this piano. The SK-2, this one here is 24 years old. If I wasn't really paying attention and no one really pointed it out, and I'd like to slip this by on a couple of the other salesmen, is have them sit on here and say, hey, why don't you play this SK-2? Tell me what you think about this one. And see if they even notice the subtlety. See if they notice that the casters are smaller, the stretcher overlap, integrated design is not there. So when you have a listen and they play on it, it's basically, this thing still makes you feel great. And I'm remembering that 25 years ago when the SK pianos first came out, I'm sure I played an SK-2, but the one I remember playing was the 9-foot. And I had to drive out of this town to go find it, and that's what made me an SK fan. And it wasn't until maybe 12 or 15 years later that we started selling them here. And with that, if you have questions or comments about your existing piano, your existing SK, or any Kawai piano, and go ahead and list them on there. We may get some good ideas for videos out of that. And also we like to interact and hear how some people also feel about the way that Kawai pianos respond to them as just a classical player or a rock and roller, a jazz player, or a composer. It's really a desirable instrument. This one here is 24 years old. I just can't think of anyone who would not want this piano unless they currently own like an SK5 or 6 or something like that. The new ones are really something to take a lot of pride in ownership. This piano going back 24 years old, I would love to have access to something like this in my house, in my studio, at a venue. Until next time, this is Ted Barcelou with Alamo Piano Galleries, reminding you this has been a brief recap on a previously owned 24-year-old SK-2 piano that is still a beautiful charm in and of itself as an instrument. And with that, we'll see you next time, and thanks again for watching and your viewership. At the end of the shoot, because he was within earshot, I stand corrected, I learned something. I'm gonna turn this over to Kevin Higgins. He owns an SK piano, and he's gonna tell me the proper term for improving this piano in the last 24 years. There's a whole concept behind it.
Yeah, so they call the term Kaizen, which is K-A-I-Z-E-N. And so it's Japanese practice to attempt to get slightly better every day, all the time. And so that's how you get from a beautiful instrument that in 2001 was at the pinnacle of craftsmanship all the way to a current SK-2. Gotcha. As minor as the changes may be, when you take 24 years of trying to get better every day, there's a pretty profound difference.
Adds up after a while.
Yeah, it does.
Well,
yeah.
Great. That's part of their work ethic and mentality and their whole theory of existing, which is improving, kind of like playing piano. I need to get better every day.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, thinner.
Thanks a lot for the insight. We'll see you soon.
Yep.